Great to be here. This is kind of an awkward talk, partly because I'm the only thing standing between you and the coffee break, but also because this is kind of an unsolved problem, and it's also something that I know a lot of you in this room are actually coming up with answers to. Following the conference and the research summit, and even things like Jeffrey's talk just now, there are a whole bunch of real use cases happening. So in some ways, this is a bit redundant. But I really wanted to spend just a little bit of time, especially because this is 5 years now since we started the TinyML Summit series. I wanted to spend a little bit of time just kind of going through what I've seen working, and really trying to kind of help focus maybe the conversation around this, and try and pull in hopefully a lot of your ideas, and see how we can move this forward as a community. And last year's conference, I really liked Stacey's take. She's actually going to be running a panel, I think, this afternoon, where she'll probably talk more about some of what she observed. But she saw this incredible explosion of technology, all of these amazing capabilities, and I think it's probably obvious to all of us in this room what the vision of what we can do with this stuff is as technologists, but she looked around and she didn't see the killer applications, or even many applications at all. There were a lot of people offering building blocks to build solutions, but very few stories of people who'd actually managed to take it end to end and solve problems that people actually cared about and would pay money for. So I've spent some time, quite a lot of time, sort of thinking about this. I left Google last year and I'm doing my own startup where I'm betting that we can actually find these end-to-end problems we can solve in the real world. And so this is much more of an exploration of kind of the work in progress of some approaches that I've seen having some impact in the community, and really trying to kind of get people thinking along these lines, get feedback, get ideas, and just get us together as a community thinking about, okay, what are the key things we can do to actually move TinyML from academia, and I liked IT for Ivory Tower, and actually get it into people's hands. So one of the challenges I've always had is when there are real-world use cases, for example, within Google, I've spent years saying, oh yeah, we're using TensorFlow Micro and TinyML and all these things, all of these different use cases, but I can't tell you about them. And it always reminds me of the sort of the trope of, in TV shows, the kid will often say, oh, I've got a girlfriend, but you can't meet her because she's in Canada. And it always, especially after several years, it started to feel a bit like that, where I was saying to people, look, trust me, these things exist, but I just can't tell you about them. And I was hoping that that would kind of get easier after I left Google, but it turns out that a lot of the manufacturing world, especially consumer electronics, industrial, all of these very traditional industries, they usually are not geared up to actually talk about new things they're doing. If they're doing something new that works, they don't want to tell their competitors about it, which is very different from the traditional kind of big tech, Google, Meta, Amazon, where there's often a lot of value seen in kind of boasting about all the awesome things you're doing. So this is one of the biggest things I see is even when I privately know about things, either through my own company or other people who've been able to sort of, tell me in a non-public forum about stuff that's working, it's almost impossible to share those more widely. And even when you can share them, often the product life cycles might be 2 years. So something might work, but you'd only see that come into the public domain sort of 2 years later, which one of the examples I'm just going to be talking about is exactly like that from Curate. So what can we do about that? I'm trying to do what I can to really gather together the success stories. Like, let's see if we can give Stacy and journalists and other people like that some really good stories that they can write about. Like, I loved Jeffrey's example about the welding. That's a very relatable story, and it's a really interesting story about how things work. But we need to make sure that we actually have a pipeline to, when people like Jeffrey are able and willing to talk about their successes, actually get them to people who can actually cover them. I also think things like indirect successes, looking at companies that have raised a bunch of money and are having, sort of growing and expanding, even if they can't talk about exactly all of the use cases they're solving, that's really useful evidence. So, looking at people like Edge Impulse and a bunch of the other sponsors to this conference, and a lot of the faces I see out there, I know are working at companies where they're having success, they just aren't able to talk about it, but at least we can actually point to the overall company's success to say, hey, look, there really is something here. Trying to figure out kind of semi-private forums where we might be able to talk about some of the things that have worked, some of the challenges, almost like a TinyML Anonymous, so that we can share our experiences and do whatever we can to encourage the people that we're working with. I know it's challenging because you're already persuading them to pay money and work with you in the first place, and then you're saying, oh, and can you do this other thing that your company never does, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable too. But anything we can do to just try and ask at least partners to explain the benefits of being more open, I think would really help. And just to highlight some of these successes here, Keurig are one of the companies that I point to. They're not using TensorFlow like Micro. This is actually a project that started even before TensorFlow like Micro was released. But a couple of years ago, they actually finally launched recognizing which cups you put in the machine. And that sounds kind of simple, but it actually does two really important things. One of them is that it brews coffee better because it knows which coffee blend you actually put into the machine, so it can get the brewing recipe exactly right. So there's a big consumer benefit. The other one is that it means that you can have a subscription service which gives you exactly the coffee pods that you're actually using, and make sure you never run out of coffee pods, but also make sure that you don't end up with this ever-increasing stockpile of coffee pods that you're not using. So it turned into a really important revenue-generating feature for Keurig, and it's all reliant on being able to do this microcontroller-based vision recognition. And it's come out as a, hey, this is a news story that this thing exists, but it hasn't generally been highlighted as a TinyML win just because that's not how the consumer electronics and appliance manufacturers really explain themselves and focus on. Another one that I really liked that came out at CES was using computer vision to tell where somebody's head and ears are in a soundbar, so you can actually do very precise beamforming at like 30 frames per second to give much better audio quality. And as I'm working with customers, the things I like to start with are, okay, what are the top 2 or 3 things that your customers, especially in consumer electronics, buy your products for? And for things like soundbar, it's price, audio quality. And so this is directly improving the audio quality aspect, like one of the key selling points. Again, it's not necessarily being highlighted as a TinyML win, but we should really sort of embrace this, because I think there are a lot more audio use cases where we can actually follow this up. One that is probably more well known in the TinyML community is WiseEye and HiMax actually getting their person detection solution into Dell laptops. And that's been really interesting because it has opened up a whole world of other laptop use cases, and it's made laptop manufacturers actually very open to doing, not just sensing of people, but sensing of gestures, and all sorts of other intelligence. So, I just wanted to really highlight that as something that's, worth celebrating. The other thing that I've, and again, this is sort of echoing some of what Jeffrey was talking about, is finding the right collaborators to work with. Because we, as technologists, probably don't have the right relationships to the people who can actually benefit from our solutions. So figuring out how we can collaborate with people who have the distribution, who can actually speak the language of electricians or people doing control logic or whatever the particular domains are, that can really give us a big boost in terms of accelerating reaching people. And one of my favorite examples is Blues Wireless, because Ray Ozzie's company actually does a great little card that for I think about $50 you get 10 years of connectivity with no subscription or sign up needed for kind of low bandwidth IoT cell networks. And that's actually a fantastic complement to doing TinyML sensing, because we're able to take large amounts of data on the edge and then turn it into actionable information that can then really get the most value out of that very small data connection. And they have a whole bunch of customers who are actually have been able to connect us with. So really trying to think imaginatively about, hey, how can we pair our solutions with other providers so that we can reach people that we wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. The third part is really thinking about how we offer our solutions. I think I've seen, again, coming back to, Zach and Edge Impulse, they're doing some fantastic work on actually trying to focus on particular verticals and offer very, very complete solutions, things that actually solve the problems that people are starting out to solve, versus saying, hey, here's all of this wonderful components that you can put together any solution you need, which was very much the approach I started off with TensorFlow Micro, and I fairly rapidly discovered that it was overwhelming. People just don't have the time to do these very time or resources to do these very speculative kind of experimental projects. So you need to be able to bring them something that actually addresses the problem that they set out to solve that morning. And so really trying to think about how we can do a better job of targeting our solutions and doing system integration, I think is really important. So as I said at the start, this is a weird talk for me. I don't really have the answers. This is more me sharing kind of a work in progress. I'm hoping we have maybe time for a couple of questions. And please come up and grab me afterwards, or drop me an email, p@usefulsensors.com. There's also a link to the talk you can find online down in the bottom right corner. And yeah, I would love to hear, what do you think? What do you think, we should be doing to actually grow the number of end-to-end applications that we have there?